Hey, so Thursday is Tisha B'Av. Do you have time now to talk some Parsha?
Sure.
In this week's Parsha, we find many familiar mitzvahs. We find the Ten Commandments, we have Shema, Tefillin, Mezuzah. But before all of those, we find maybe even a bigger emphasis from Moshe Rabbeinu about how he davened to enter Eretz Israel, how he pleaded to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to let him go into Eretz Israel. And Chazal, in different places, learn many aspects and rules for davening out of the way Moshe Rabbeinu davened, like saying Tzedakah Zimra before Shmoneh Esrei, for example. But the interesting fact is that with all the pleading and davening that Moshe did, his prayers actually didn't get answered. His request, what he wanted, wasn't fulfilled by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is this what we want to see as the model of tefillah? Is this the great example of davening that we find? A davening that supposedly doesn't get accepted and the request isn't answered?
That's a very good question, and maybe that's exactly the point. Moshe Rabbeinu wants to teach us tefillah. And Chazal say, as you said, this is one of the places we learn how to daven from. Moshe Rabbeinu wants to teach us that as opposed to what we may think, tefillah is not about getting what you're asking for. Here, Moshe Rabbeinu is asking and he doesn't get what he wants, and still, this is what he brings as the perfect tefillah, as probably one of his greatest tefillahs. If Moshe Rabbeinu would have taught us tefillah through an example of his tefillah being answered, very quickly we get caught up in that aspect. Okay, here Moshe davened really well, and he got what he wanted. Tefillah is a way to get what you want. You know, tefillah isn't Amazon. You don't go on, you ask what you're asking for, and you get it delivered. Tefillah is about a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you may ask, what do you mean it's about a relationship? Look what tefillah is about. Even here, Moshe Rabbeinu is asking for something. But that's true. Think about every relationship. Often people think the essence of a relationship is being able to listen to the other person, is being able to hear what's troubling them. That's key to a good relationship. But if you think about it, someone who has a strong relationship with someone and is not sharing with them what they're going through, what their troubles are, what's disturbing them, no relationship is actually happening there. There's no connection there. A relationship with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not only following Torah, listening to the mitzvot, doing what needs to be done. Relationship with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also sharing with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu your pains, davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, building up that relationship. And a strong tefillah is when you really open your heart and really pour your heart like Moshe Rabbeinu did before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not when it's actually answered the way we think it needs to be answered. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So in essence, what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing here is giving us the most important rule in tefillah. Tefillah is not about what happens after tefillah. Tefillah is about tefillah itself. This is why the word in Hebrew is lehitpalel. It's a reflexive verb. It's not lefalel. It's not doing something. It's not causing something like purchasing on Amazon. It's something that happens to me. Lehitpalel is a process I go through. I'm requesting, I'm turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm crying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but at the end of the day, it's about what happens in that process, the relationship that's built.
So it's actually very interesting what you're saying, because davening, as one would have thought, isn't about getting answered, not about your requests and then fulfilling that request. Davening is about the davening, about the relationship you are building with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and getting closer to Hashem and working on that relationship. And like I said in our Parsha, there's a lot of mitzvos, and one of those mitzvos, one of those parshiot that we find is Parshat Shema, which ended up being the core of davening. We say it in the morning, we say it in the evening, we say it before we go to sleep, we say it in many, many different occasions around our life. And that parshiah actually teaches us one of the most important mitzvahs, like the Chinuch says. It teaches us the mitzvah of loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when the Chinuch and the Rambam and other Rishonim, when they describe the mitzvah of loving God and they ask how does one get to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they talk about going outside and look at the world and look how wonderful the world is and appreciate the world, and from that you get to appreciate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and from that you get to build a stronger relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And taking it back to what we were saying about davening is about creating that relationship. And the interesting thing is that some of our best prayers, some of our best davening actually happens when things aren't going that well for us. And in modern day psychology, when people are looking to better their life, one of the basic things to do is to count your blessings. There's a famous professor, Martin Seligman, the famous psychologist from positive psychology, who came up with a famous exercise of the 3 blessings, which is to sit down every day for 10 minutes and actually count 3 things that went very well for you and you were very appreciative about them, in order to better your life, to become a better person, and to uplift yourself in situations where you need to be uplifted. To go back to the Chinuch and the other Rishonim that describe the mitzvah of loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is about going outside and appreciating the little things in life and appreciating what we have and counting your blessings. That's what it is, right? Blessings are part of davening. We have a mitzvah counting 100 blessings a day. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actual good things in life that you have to appreciate and you have to count them, thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for them, and that's how you build your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And going back to Moshe Rabbeinu, maybe that's what Moshe is trying to teach us. This is what davening is about. Davening is about building that relationship. Davening is not only requesting things that you want, but actually internalizing the blessings that you already have in your life and appreciating them.
What's actually interesting is we say that every tefillah has impact. Even if we don't see that result, even if we don't see, it does have impact. It has impact on us. It'll be answered in its own way. And we see that here in our Parsha because Moshe Rabbeinu was begging to enter Eretz Israel. And seemingly the answer he gets is no. But if we look deeper, we realize that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't enter Eretz Israel, but Eretz Israel came to him because Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe end up settling and expanding Eretz Israel into where he was buried. And we see within our Parsha, it seems totally random. Suddenly, a few psukim later, Az Yavil Moshe, where Moshe sets up the Arei Miklat throughout the eastern side of the Jordan River. So in essence, Moshe's tefillah was answered. Not the way he thought, not the way he was begging for, but the impact was still there. So as we said, if Torah is Hashem talking to us, tefillah is us talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And like every healthy relationship, that's key. We need to talk, we need to share with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we need to pour our hearts before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as we said, sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu says yes, sometimes he says no, and sometimes he says an interesting yes, as seems he did for Moshe Rabbeinu in our Parsha.
Beautiful, wonderful. We're right before Tisha B'Av, but by the time this airs, it will be after Tisha B'Av, and with all the extra davening we have in Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av is always the mark 3 weeks before Elul begins, the time of davening, the time of prayers, the time of slichos. We don't always know how HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers our prayers, but we know our prayers are needed, and our prayers is what creates our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu even stronger and even greater. Great. Shkoyach, Yitzi.
Thank you, Tuvia.
So we'll talk again next week. Please, God.